The 7th generation Ford Mustang uses basically the same engines and underpinnings as its predecessor. So you could be forgiven for thinking this car isn't a huge step forward from the car it replaces. Ford claims that there's plenty of leaps in terms of technology. A lot of that's down to inside the cabin, and it's all to capture a new audience for the Mustang brand. But we want to know if that's come at the cost of the original Mustang essence. We're here in South Australia at the Bend Motorsport Park to see what the new Mustang's like and whether the new audience has come at a cost of the old one. So let's get into it.
The range is smaller now, with only 4 options: Ecoboost, GT Manual and Auto, and GT Convertible. It's also a fair bit more expensive, with the base model $11,000 dearer than its equivalent. Compared to rivals like the Nissan Z and Toyota Supra though, you still get a lot for your money. With LED headlights, a digital driver's display, 13.2-inch touchscreen, premium 12-speaker Bang & Olufsen sound system, leather upholstery, and the seats even get heating and cooling. The standard performance pack brings enhanced cooling, 6-piston Brembo front brakes, a rear LSD, and a drift brake functionality. Naturally, you can tailor the Stang to your tastes with appearance packs, 8 paint colours, and more. Driver-centric options include Magna-Ride adaptive dampers and snuggly Recaro bucket seats. The Dark Horse gets more serious again, but unfortunately it's all sold out, at least for now. Make sure to head to the detailed written review at carsguide.com.au for the full specification details.
When you look at the overall shape of the S650, you can see it hasn't changed too much from the car it replaces. However, when it comes to the details of the new Mustang, there are some really tasty bits. Starting with the front end and this grille, it's more differentiated from the Ecoboost with the 2 vertical slats in there to show that you've spent the extra money to get the V8. Then you've got these lovely 3-element headlights with daytime running lights that look super crisp. And the general vibe of the whole car is that much sharper, that much more edgy and athletic. And I think it's a really good transformation that Ford has managed with the new Mustang. It's also got these fresh 19-inch alloy wheels. And this car in particular has this appearance pack that adds the spoiler and the stripes. It's inside where the 7th generation Mustang has come the furthest though. The presentation, the fit and finish is worlds ahead of the car it replaces. Right down to the materials, you've got up on the dashboard, nice and soft. Up on the doors, you've got nice and soft. And unlike the previous car, when you're up driving, nothing's creaking. You can barely hear any movement of plastics. It just feels like Ford's really gone through with a fine-tooth comb, improved all the mounting points. It's probably what makes it a little bit heavier, but the result is a car that feels much more solid and like it'll stand the test of time a hell of a lot better. And that's before we get to the technology, which is, frankly outstanding compared to the car it replaces. You've got so much customization in here. You've got the really powerful Unreal Engine 3D graphics. They manifest themselves in the 12.4-inch digital driver's display. When you change modes, you can see this cool animation of the car spinning around. And look, for the old school performance car nut, that's probably not gonna get your blood rushing that much, but the point of this new Mustang is to bring in new buyers. And yeah, I was a little bit skeptical, but when you see it happening in real life, yeah, it's pretty cool, gotta say. There's also further customization for the dials. You can go through between Fox Body, Classic and SVT Cobra dials in this car, and I assume there's going to be more added in the future. You've got all sorts of other dials you can set there as well, and they're all pretty legible. In the center touchscreen, it's a 13.2-inch unit. It's got wireless Apple CarPlay and, again, even further customization. We press this little pony shortcut here. You've got custom modes. You can change your auxiliary cages. You've got your track laps and all sorts of stuff where you can access the drift brake, which is probably one of the coolest features of this new car, and we'll get to test it out very shortly. And finally, we come to the storage and practicalities in here because they're pretty good for a sports car. You've got a USB-A and a USB-C port, 12-volt socket and a wireless charging pad in MY24 cars. That disappears for the next model year. You've got these cup holders which interface quite well with the auto, but if you want tall cups, they don't really work with the manual. A little bit of covered storage, and of course we've got the seats in the back. But again, they're not really for anyone but children. They do have ISOFIX tabs though, so you can fit a baby capsule back there if you so wish and climb in through these fairly narrow apertures. But it's got all you need from a sports car, and it's definitely a little bit more daily usable than something like a Toyota Supra.
Thanks to the Mustang's generous size, the boot's very usable at 408 litres. It's enough for 2 golf bags, and the rear seats split fold for longer objects. The Ecoboost gets a new engine that develops 232 kilowatts and 475 newton meters, so a little less power but a bit more torque. Response is improved thanks to a twin-scroll turbocharger, and with a quad-mode exhaust, it sounds pretty convincing too. But what you want to hear about is the 345 kilowatt, 550 newton meter Gen 4 Coyote V8, which benefits from a new twin intake system and some other internal changes. Best to get straight into how it drives.
The Mustang benefits from all of the same changes that have been made, or the same vein of changes that have been made to the interior and to the design out on the road. You've still got the same 5-litre V8 under the bonnet that produces not only plenty of power, but also a lovely sound. And it's quite tractable too. It's not a highly strung V8, but equally it's not a sort of big, heavy, trucky V8 that only produces torque down low. It's got a nice tractability and it revs cleanly all the way through to the 7,500 RPM red line. Then we come to the chassis. Now we've driven a few permutations of the Mustang, actually all of them now, so from Ecoboost right up to the convertible and Dark Horse. This car is, I guess, kind of your basic boulevard cruiser that we're in now. So you've got non-adaptive dampers, so the basic passive items, and it's the 5-litre GT with a 10-speed auto. And the ride comfort is really good. It's nice and plush for what this kind of car is. It doesn't shake you around too much, but I do find that on these dampers, it does lack a little bit of body control, a little bit of sophistication. So I think that extra couple of $1,000s spent on the Magna Ride is a very well spent couple of extra $1,000. And to be honest, you know, the auto's pretty good. It's been retuned, but 10 speeds remains just a few too many for a V8 like this. Maybe an 8-speed or even a 6-speed would suit the character of this car a little bit better. And so that means I can only really recommend the manual gearbox transmission. It's pretty good with the get drag. It's pretty easy to use. It's got auto rev match function, and all the Australian cars with the Magna Ride dampers also get the flat shift functionality, which is kind of cool. Neat little touch. When you've got wide open throttle, you can just slam a gear through and it'll accept it. The ECU cleverly cuts throttle, and it's pretty neat. When it comes to corners as well, the steering is much improved in either car. It's got a really nice ratio, very direct. Doesn't feel like an old ropey muscle car. I mean, it is a brand new car, but you kind of expect that from a Mustang still. It really has a little bit of sporty DNA. Definitely feels like Ford Europe has had quite a lot to do with the way this car drives. It rounds edges off really nicely. It feels sophisticated. You know, it seems strange saying that about a Mustang, but to be fair, it hasn't lost any of its hooliganistic characteristics though, because it is still a bit of a hoot and a bit of a larrikin, you know. It's got a lot more talent than it ever had, but it's still a 1.8 ton car that's quite big, quite wide, and relatively long, so there's no mistaking it for a Toyota GR86 or something like that through a good twisty road, despite the fact it has plenty of talent. You have to approach it a little bit differently, knowing there's a bit of weight over the front end. You guide the front end a little bit more gently inwards, and then you can really have fun on the way out. The ESC system I've found to be very sophisticated in this car too. It knows just what to do. Ramping it up into one of the sportier drive modes from normal, say sport for example, seems to give you just that little bit more leeway. It gives a little bit more confidence in you as the driver, and then of course going to track disables a little bit more of it and leaves you a bit more on your own, which is really clever. Speaking of racetracks, we're at the Bend, so of course we had a crack on the track. We used the West Circuit, which is a really good little handling loop for road cars. It's got a lot of sort of nuanced elevation change, a lot of camber, on camber, off camber, really good hard braking zones. Now we first went out in the GT. I'll throw a little footage over the top now. And I've got to say, from the old GT, especially with the Magna Ride, that the old car felt a little bit all at sea, just didn't feel super keyed in. There were a couple of things you really would have wanted to do before you took it to the track seriously. The new car is actually quite comfortable. It's got that real nice response, and it's got very strong brakes. The Aussie cars are all specified standard with the Brembo brake kit, and that makes a difference. You can just confidently trust the brakes of the car to bring you to a stop, and it's really nice to have that extra little sense of security. This is no longer a muscle car that's, you know, all motor, no brakes, no steering, no suspension. The Mustang is well beyond that today. And then we stepped in to the Dark Horse, the 6-speed manual Dark Horse, which are all sold out in Australia. So if you're one of the lucky owners of that car, that 100K Mustang, I think, yeah, you've made a very good choice. It's very good. that much better than the basic car. Just the different electronic power steering tune, the different springs and dampers, and the wider wheels just give it all that bit more support, feels stronger under brakes, feels stronger in the corners. It's amazing how much a whole load of those little differences add up. The engine also feels a little bit more happy to rev, and the Tremec transmission is just beefier, better. Not to say that the Getrag feels noodly and weak, it's still got a pretty nice shift, but once you compare the two, the Dark Horse is definitely the way to go. So here's hoping that there's another Mustang sort of special edition, Mach 1, maybe a GT350 for Australia in the future that adds those features. And finally, we come to, well, pretty much the silliest feature of all, those sort of track map. You've got so much customization in this car. You've got normal, sport, track, slippery, drag strip, all these different drive modes, and they all have their place. Plus, just like Hyundai's N cars, you end up with a customizable drive mode that you can lock in. And it's super easy to go through and change all the settings just using the steering wheel and the touchscreen. And you've also got access in My Track apps with this little shortcut button with the pony, of course, for the drift brake and the line lock. The drift brake is, I mean, frankly, it's ridiculous. The fact that and it's not just Ford, I should add, that also Toyota GR is looking at handbrakes. You've got these two companies, these two pretty grown-up mega OEMs developing tools to make their modern performance cars slide around like rally cars. In this case, we've got the electro-hydraulic drift brake function. It works just like a normal handbrake, and it's very sturdy, lovely springing, but on a skid pad or a racetrack, if you wish, you can whack it once you've got drift brake on, and as long as you've got the ESC fully disabled, which you can do in this car, and you can hoon about and have an absolute laugh, and it's a real ball. Of course, you've got an LSD standard in all Australian cars, including the Ecoboost. So even if you go for the most affordable Mustang, you can still have a real party on the racetrack, on a skid pan. And yeah, the overwhelming feeling is that Ford has really nailed the brief, keeping all of those classic Mustang characteristics to the driving experience, yet also adding a layer of sophistication to the technology, a layer of sophistication that not only helps keen drivers and those who love Mustangs, but also those who might be new to a vehicle like this. Makes the learning curve a little bit easier and encourages you to learn. So, I don't know, it's hard not to be a little bit smitten with the new Mustang, especially in V8 manual guise.
The new Mustang is yet to be rated by ANCAP, but has a lot more safety equipment than the old car. 7 airbags, AEB with pedestrian, cyclist and reverse function, adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring and rear cross-traffic alert are some of the more crucial systems. Of course, you can head over to the full written review at carsguide.com.au for all the safety details. A 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty covers the new Mustang. Ford offers 4 years of cap price servicing at $379 per visit, due every 12 months or 15,000 Ks. That makes it competitive with rivals like the Nissan Z and Toyota Supra.
So all the little changes made to the 7th gen Mustang add up to something really quite special. It feels like an iterative process rather than an all-new model, but that's no bad thing. Like the GR86 and BRZ second generation, the Mustang is a bit better everywhere, almost in a Porsche-like way. I'm not comparing it to a 911, but it is still a fantastic driver's car. And now, more than ever, it stands up purely on merit against cars like the Toyota Supra and Nissan Z, where previously it might have sold on design alone over those cars. That said, the design is still fantastic. What hasn't changed for the latest Mustang is the pick of the range. If you're not going to be able to get yourself a dark horse, then you've got to go for the 6-speed manual with the Magnaride dampers in GT, guys. It's simply the best, unless you want open-top motoring, which the convertible offers. And that's the other brilliance of the Mustang range, is the sheer choice on offer. Let me know your pick in the comments section down below. Make sure to hit subscribe to the Cars Guide YouTube channel if you haven't done so already, and make sure to head over to carsguide.com.au for all the details on the new Mustang.